Well, welcome everyone. This session of the Florida Library's online Fostering Resilient Communities virtual conference. My name is Kelly McDonald. I'm the Manager of Programs and Services for the Tampa Bay Library Consortium, and this session is part of our Community Connections track, which is brought to you by TBLC. There is going to be time during the presentation to use the chat box to answer questions, so please use that to interact with our presenter. Again, make sure that you have selected all panelists and attendees so people can see your questions coming in. You're going to receive an email shortly after today's conference containing a link to a brief survey on your experiences with the conference. So please complete that survey for us. It gives us guidance on developing events for Florida Library staff and makes an impact on our funding for the future. You're also going to receive a link to a recording for this session, as well as some handouts and the slides as well. So those slides will be provided. This session is Connecting the Dots. It was created and presented by Tom Vitale. Tom currently serves as the director of the Patterson Library in Westfield, New York. Previously, he served as the outreach coordinator for the Chautauqua Cattaraugus Library System, the most Western cooperative library system in New York State. In 2018, his peers elected him to the New York Library Association Council after having served in multiple capacities on the Rural Libraries Roundtable and the Library Access Roundtable. So I want to welcome Tom here today to present Connecting the Dots.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate that. And welcome to everybody who's in the room with me. This presentation is obviously generally done in person, and it tends to be very interactive. So we only have 45 minutes together, so I will be cognizant of that as I'm presenting, but I will be asking questions, and you know, I encourage you to talk to me. Use the chat box to ask questions, use the chat box to make comments. You know, we're all kind of learning from each other here, and that's what's really important when you're dealing with community engagement in general. Kelly, am I supposed to see my screen?
Yeah, do you want to hit that share screen and share your slides one more time?
Oh, yes. Okay, there we go. All right, wonderful. So hopefully everybody can see that okay. And I do have the chat box up in the corner for people to ask questions. Okay, connecting the dots, community library collaborations. So, all right. It's about sustainability. So today, your conference topic is resiliency in libraries. And I believe that sustainability and resiliency go hand in hand. Resiliency is generally defined as an organization or an individual's opportunity to bounce back from any situation that's thrown at them. Sustainability is our ability as an individual or an institution to make sure that our institution continues to be able to exist. And there are three pillars of sustainability that we look at, in particular when we're talking about libraries, and that's a social sustainability, environmental, and economic. So economic sustainability would be figuring out where you're getting your funding from, and if that funding source is not something that is necessarily a long-term type of financial situation, then you would think of other ways to take care of that, whether that be a tax millage or, you know, the creation of an endowment or money market account that would gain rather considerable interest for you. Environmental sustainability deals with the carbon footprint that our libraries leave in general. So making small changes to your library, like not using so many paper products, working with patrons to maybe not use register tape when we're checking out, and encouraging them to give their email address to us so that we can email them communications back and forth. Or even in today's even in today's age where we have lots of technology going on, sharing text messages with them. Today, we're talking mainly about social sustainability, which is our community connections. In order for us to exist as libraries in our individual communities and the broader environment, we need to make community connections that are lasting, because all of the people around us, all of the institutions around us are here to assist us in keeping the library running. And oftentimes the library is looked at as a place of trust. Most people in their community trust the library unless there's been something really difficult that's occurred. And so we want to keep it that way. And a lot of organizations will often come to us for us to work with them hand in hand on programs. So today we're going to be focusing a lot on that. So it's really about your vision, and what you need to do when you're planning your social sustainability and your other pillars of sustainability is you need to have a vision for your library. You need to have a vision for yourself in whatever capacity you fit into the organizational chart. You need to have a vision for your staff, and that doesn't mean direct reports. So if you're not a director or a supervisor, you're a librarian or paraprofessional, that doesn't necessarily supervise people. You still have colleagues, and it's important to know what you would like to see from your colleagues as a vision to sustain your organization. What is your vision for your library? Where do you see it in 5 years or in 10 years? The vision for your library users. I know Florida jargon for library user tends to be customer. I say user a lot up here. That's more local because my board of trustees prefers user, but that's very interchangeable with customer or consumer or patron. What's your vision for your community? It's really important to remember that the library is part of the broader community. The library is a leader in the community. It's on par with the school district. It's on par with the hospital in your community. It's one of the main institutions in any neighborhood, really. So when I present this in person, I have activities throughout, which expands the timing of the program. I am going to make sure that Kelly has all of these handouts that would go with the activities to share with you. So what I'll do for this presentation is, I'll talk a little bit about the activity and maybe ask some questions to get your thought juices running at this time of the morning, and also for us to have a dialogue. So the first activity that we would be looking at is mapping out your community and your community asset mapping worksheet. So mapping out the community, you would receive a copy of a form that basically looks like the solar system. So there's a sun in the middle, which I say is the library. And then you have all sorts of little planets rotating around the sun. So all of those boxes or circles are supposed to be your partners in the community. So what I would like to know from you is, in your particular community where your library or your library branch is, or in Andrea's case, because she is here with us from a nonprofit organization. So Andrea, your little son would be your not-for-profit that you're representing, and then your little planets would be everybody around you. So who's in your community that you can reach out to make a community connection, or who have you already reached out to make a community connection in your community that's working out really well? Remember, this can be schools or not-for-profit agencies, foundations, colleges. The business sector is very important, your local chamber of commerce, etc. So does anybody have any examples of community connections that they've made that have been successful? And I'll give you a few minutes to type. if anybody wants to say anything. If not, we'll move on. Okay, so Hope is telling me that at one time you had a Friends of the Library and you would say the schools. Okay, great. Schools are super important to reach out to. We do a lot of work with schools throughout the year, but really focus on the end of the year because that's when our summer reading program is really starting, and the school media specialists up here like to help our public libraries work with the kids to make sure that there's a reduction of summer slide. So that's really great. Okay, Andrea saying that she first met with folks from the library at a summit to end youth homelessness. That's wonderful. That's really great. Okay, let me just make sure I'm not losing the chat here. Stephanie is saying that when she worked for West Florida History Center, there was a huge digitization day that allowed the community to come in and scan their historical documents and then gave you permission to keep a digital copy for your collections. That's wonderful. And Lewis is saying that you connected with local high schools in order to connect with adults who are learning English as a second language, and you got to inform them about your services. Andrea follows up by saying that the Ending Youth Homelessness Summit led to work in youth foster care and providing additional programming to vulnerable populations. That's great. Those are all wonderful community connections because remember, the library is not just a receptacle for or I should say the library is not just a repository for materials, it's a community center. Even if you have a true community center in your particular community, the library kind of serves as like a tertiary place when you think about it. People think about home as their primary place and they think about work as their secondary environment. So we like to really push that the library is your tertiary environment. It's a place that you can come to work. It's a place that you can come to study. It's a place that you can come to, just sit back and have, some self-care time for yourself in a quiet area, or to meet people through different programs or classes. Hope also followed up saying that that her library goes into the schools to sign when the schools are signing up for lockers and classes so that they can get a library card and calendars at that time. And that's great. It's really important to bring your services out into the community because libraries obviously are still very much brick and mortar, but you want to have a robust outreach program where you're going out and you're bringing the library services to the community. And in turn, when you give out things like library cards in your calendars, your new collection list, brochures for your friends group, etc., hopefully those people will then come back into your library and then there'll be that symbiotic relationship. Gloria is saying that she's connected with the Alzheimer's Family Organization and has been able to facilitate a caregiver support group and develop a memory cafe. That is fantastic. We've just been looking at that here because we've got a memory ward at one of our assisted livings, and we've been trying to figure out how to work with them a little bit more. And I think that's so great to work with vulnerable populations. Wonderful, wonderful examples. I appreciate that. You're welcome to continue to put things into the chat box. Forgive me if I move along a little bit. I will get to everybody at some point. The community asset mapping worksheet would just talk about a goal or an outcome for your library in relationship to a community collaborator. So I'll give you a quick example, and you can think of things like this as we're taking the webinar. You can jot this stuff down so that you have it for when you're able to access your form through your library consortium. So last year, my library was trying to figure out how we were going to change some of our fundraising activities. We'd been doing the same fundraising, the same 3 fundraisers for 25 years. And, people get tired of that, especially in a little rural village. We live in a village of about 5,500 people. And it's all the same people that come to our events year after year. And we've got younger people moving into the area with their children, and we were trying to figure out what would be interesting for them and, might be something different. So we've got a local theater across the the street from us, and the County Historical Society is across the lawn from us. So we teamed up with the two of them, and then we teamed up with our local cemetery association, and our cemetery here in Westfield is almost 200 years old. So it's really historical. It's extremely well maintained. And we started doing, we had a whole weekend where we did historical cemetery tour. And that was really exciting. We were able to raise some money, and it went to the theater, to the library, and to the Historical Society. The Cemetery Association donated their proceeds back to us because they really just wanted the advertising. So that's kind of a really fun way to maybe engage with your community and host a fundraiser and really help out your library and other organizations at the same time. And they will remember that and come back to you to do other things. In our case, the cemetery tours were so popular that we will be making it an annual thing. Hopefully we'll be able to do that this year with COVID, but if not, definitely next year. Okay, so moving on, let me just get this back up. Okay, 1 second. Oh, Kelly, do you know how I go back?
Yeah, there should be, if you go down to the bottom left with your cursor,
Okay.
there should be these really light buttons.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay, guys, I apologize. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about marketing now, because marketing goes hand in hand with outreach. Marketing is really, really important to bring your brand to the community. So figuring out interesting ways to get your message out to the community and unique ways that are going to engage people are something that concerns a lot of us today. There's a library marketing and communication group that's been holding a conference for the last couple of years, I think down in Texas, where you've got members of the library community discussing how we market to our current environment, especially with social media changing so often, and also, you know, trying to figure out how we continue to do traditional marketing, because we recognize the fact that there is a digital divide, and we do have users who don't have internet at home, or, you know, perhaps they just don't have a smart device or a computer at home. And that's often where the library connects our users for technological purposes, which is extremely important to them in our age of email. So, you know, some of the photos I have up here just kind of highlight some of the things we've done in my system. When I was outreach coordinator a few years ago, I had taken some of the marketing budget that I received from my director, and I turned it into a mini grant opportunity. So all 38 of the libraries in my system were able to apply for up to $200 of a marketing mini grant to get certain things done that they just didn't have room for in their budget. So up in the top corner there, you can see the Prendergast Library. They had tablecloth made for when they go out to do tabling. The little Sinclairville Free Library had a banner made to put on their wagon for their History Days parade. The Ellington Farman Library had a cool board made custom by their Amish community up there. And they've got it in their really large window that has a spotlight on it that everybody can see when they're passing by in their cars or on bicycles or while they're walking. And she puts all of her big announcements on there, and that's been really helpful. And also the system obviously brings in a lot of different marketing tools, and then we go out to our county fairs every year. My system covers a 2-county area, so we go to both county fairs, and we stress tabling here, because when you're in a rural, more conservative area where we live, targeting your target audience is going to be a lot of people who don't want to hear radio ads or see TV ads. They don't really care about billboards so much. They want to talk to somebody. So when you table at different events, and I assure you, when, keep a calendar or get a calendar of events going on in your community, in your region, and make those connections and try to get out, even if it's just for a couple of hours, to be at a table for your library, to sign people up for cards, to give out brochures, to give out little tchotchkes. It's so important, and people will remember that. Just a little bit of a funny story. When I first started, we were changing out all of our mouse pads with our new marketing. So the system had bought, thousands of mouse pads, and we were giving them out to all of our to all 38 of the libraries. And I had taken some of them the first year I was here to the county fair, and people were picking them up, and they were so excited to get them because they thought that they were pickle jar openers. And so we just started marketing them as such because they had the grips on the bottom, so people were able to actually take them and use them that way. So when people would come over to the table and pick up the mouse pad and be like, oh, what's this? Instead of saying it's a mouse pad, we just say, oh, it's a pickle jar opener. So now we kind of joke around in the system and say that, every time we see one of those, somebody's taking them out of their drawer, they're opening up their pickles, and people can say, when I open up my pickles, I think about the library. So that's kind of a fun thing. So just little things like that. You want to think of, what mediums you're using. Again, are you tabling? Are you getting a billboard? Are you using TV ads or radio ads in your particular community or region, because that's what people look at? Are you using your Facebook? Are you using your Instagram? Are you using Twitter? Depending on social media, are you using all of those? What's your budget look like for marketing? That's obviously really important. There are again, we started our little mini grant because, libraries just often don't have $200 to put into their marketing. And then what kind of manpower do you have? Because there are certain tabling opportunities that take a lot of manpower. Our county fairs go for 7 days each, and you've got to have manpower to have people at your table. You can leave the table unattended, but it doesn't draw really much of an audience. So you have to be able to think about all of those things and figure out how you can garner support. Okay. And again, remember, if you have questions as I'm talking, you're welcome to put them up into the chat, and I will answer them as we're going. So moving on, it's about resource development. That's very, very important in libraries. We're a resource for the entire community in the region. So what are some things that we do? What are some things that we do to build resources? We look at who our community partners are, and you can use your you can use your asset map for that. We look at relationship building with those community partners, and then cross-information disseminations, or cross-marketing, really. So, think about all of the different organizations in your little community. You have the post office across the street. You've got, I don't know, every denomination of Christianity and churches. You've got a synagogue, you've got a mosque. How are you going to get your information out to the people in your community? Can you call up your local pastors and ask if they'll put, something about your library, a little ad or a blurb into their Sunday booklets that they give out, or, put something on their bulletins? The post office, can you put stuff out at the post office so that everybody will see it when they walk in? Can you have a fair in your library? So we had an outreach services fair for the whole system in our main library. And that worked out really well because we linked up about 26 different not-for-profits in the immediate area. And it was really great for even the not-for-profits to be able to see each other, because one of the biggest issues up here, and I don't know if you have it down there in your area, but there are a lot of not-for-profits that are doing very similar work, but they don't communicate with one another. So, you know, when we're developing resources, we're also talking about how the library can be a conduit to bring together other organizations so that they're communicating. And that was really helpful because some of the organizations were struggling with their budgets, as a lot of not-for-profits do. And some of them were even able to combine their services with one another, which helped to sustain them. So that's a really, really important thing. I also tell all of my librarians in the system, especially at the reference desk, to make sure that you have your social references available, which is your resource development for the community. So your food bank lists, your housing lists for people who are, you know, might be struggling with homelessness. You know, not-for-profits that deal with mental illness, that deal with addiction issues, that deal with people who have developmental disabilities. Pretty much anything you can think about, to have those resources available, even if you just have your 211 icon up on your computer screen so you can get to that when you're doing a reference transaction. It's important because we don't just give out reader's advisory at reference, and we don't just talk to people about research. We talk to people about social reference, because people will come to us and say, you know, maybe it's around Thanksgiving, and they'll say, hey, do you happen to know where I can get a free Thanksgiving dinner? And we don't really want to be scrambling when they come to us for that, because again, we're a trusted institution. They look at the librarians and the library staff and they say, hey, you know, these people are here to assist me. You know, so we want to have that readily available. So think about that. Even if, you know, even if you want to make a little binder to have at your reference desk so that you can pull that out and update it as necessary. And then you can also use that to give people to take with them when they leave. You can give them a copy, which is really helpful. Okay. Okay, so the next activity, oh, yes, a need to know book. That's wonderful. Carity is coined the term as a need to know book. So, so you can put a little binder together and have that. Like I said, it's really good to have, you know, some reference materials on your computer that you can look at, but it's also important to have paper so that you can give information out that people can take with them. Okay. Right, your community board, that's super important, your community board, but let's, you know, if we're thinking broadly here, sometimes you're going to have people who come into your library that have a literacy issue, and they might not be able to read what's on the community board. So, you know, at that point, they will come to the reference desk or even the circulation desk and say, you know, hey, I'm looking for this. And, you know, it's all about customer service, right? So we never want to look at the patron or the library user and say, well, it's up on the community board. You know, you can just take a sheet because it's hanging up there. You know, if somebody comes to us and they ask us that, even if it's the 50th time in the day, we want to, you know, we want to take care of them and make them feel welcome. But a community board is really great for people who are coming into the library quickly and want to go over to the community board and pick something up. So, you know, I think it's great to have all of those little things done in your library so that you have community boards, you have a need to know book, you have references on your computer. Thank you guys for chiming in, that's great. Okay, so the next activity we would have looked at together is a SWOT analysis, which is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your libraries. Okay, and that's usually used more in a corporate business model. But it applies just as well to libraries, because even though libraries are governmental or not-for-profit, public institutions, you know, we want to be able to look at these things. We want to know what our strengths as an institution are, what our weaknesses are, you know. We've been in a really difficult time since the middle of March with COVID, where we've had to basically put all of our programming online, and think of new ways very quickly that we can deliver library services to the community. And that right there is going to let us see where our weaknesses are. Were we ready? Did we have to reinvent the wheel, or did we have some kind of a procedure or a policy to get us through that time? Other weaknesses could be things like, again, we're in such a tumultuous time now with racial tensions. We've seen a lot of library directors across the nation being called to task for some terrible things that they've put up on their personal Facebook pages that have been screenshotted and sent to their boards. So, sometimes having a liability employee is not a good thing, and it's a weakness, and that can damage the trust of your institution. So we have to think about that as well. What are our opportunities? And again, that community connections are big opportunities. Keep up to date with your Chamber of Commerce. I'm not saying you have to join it and spend money, but keep up to date with it, because when you have new businesses come on board in the community, maybe have a little basket that you bring over with all sorts of little library stuff in it to welcome the new business and let them know that you're there to do business with them. Okay, that's a really exciting little thing to do. And then what threats exist in the library world? Again, we're talking about resiliency today, and libraries face threats all the time. Budget cuts. If your library is not necessarily an independent library because you're part of a municipality or a county, can your county or your city commissioners hold the library department's budget at ransom over some political issue? So we have to think about that as a threat. If we lose a certain amount of money, where are we getting that back from? And, are we now again going to be forced to do more with less? And libraries are great at doing more with less, because we've had to deal with it all the time, because libraries are usually the first thing on the chopping block when it comes to monetary support. What other threats are out there? For a little while, Amazon seemed like they were coming after libraries. Hopefully that time is gone, but we always have to kind of be on our tippy toes and ready for that next threat that's going to come after us, so that we can transform into something else for our community that our community needs and wants. And that's what makes us resilient. Okay, it's about your community. Each community, like an individual, has a very different personality. So let's look at Hillsborough County in comparison to Polk County. Hillsborough County tends to be a little bit more liberal, and Polk County seems to be a little bit more conservative. So when you go into your deeper pockets of those counties, what does the community look like there? What are the values of that community? What are the needs of that community and the wants of it? And what is the library doing to make sure that the community is having its needs met, is having its wants met as much as you can with your budget, is having their values shared? Do you have most libraries will work on a strategic plan. Even municipal libraries will have, some part of their city plan that includes the library. It's important that when a strategic plan is conducted, that there's a community analysis portion. So you want to be able to see what your demographics look like. You want to do an environmental scan to see what other institutions in your community also have a strategic plan, so that you can kind of align your plan so that you're all working for the greater good of the community. And what you want to remember, if you leave today's presentation with with any one thing, the most important thing I think you can get from this presentation is to remember that it's not, when you ask questions about your library, it's not about the library, it's about the community. So if you go out to table at an event and you want to bring a little survey with you, surveys are great for us to conduct some quick research. Do not ask people about what they want at the library. Ask people what they want in their community. Okay, that's super important because we know the answers we're going to get if we ask for, what do you want from your library? I want more books. I want more DVDs. I want more CDs. You know, I want more laptops for use. Okay, you know, those are materials. Those are things that we can, you know, work with people every day to figure out what we need to get in. And also that concerns our budget for collections. So we may not be able to get all of those things in, but what does the community need and what does the community want? So always think about the library as the community, okay? Oh, did people get disconnected? Lewis asked if anybody else got disconnected. Hopefully not. Kelly, can you tell from your end if anybody got disconnected?
It may have been like a brief pause, but we should be back.
Okay. All right, guys. So, you know, and then another thing to remember when you're looking at the community is, do you have, okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. Again, you'll have the slides and everything else, and this is being recorded. So hopefully if there was a little pause, you'll be able to hear it on the recording if you want to go back. What are some major issues that are facing your community? So, you know, do you have, I don't know, do you have an intersection that doesn't have a stoplight or a stop sign, that, you know, there's been multiple accidents and, you know, nobody in government seems to be doing anything about it? Is that something that the library can help with by maybe getting community members to organize a letter writing campaign to the people who have authority over placing stop signs or traffic lights, and getting that out there? And then once that happens, you know, the library is going to be looked at as, wow, you know, that's great. The library helped get us together so that we were able to accomplish this goal as a community. So think about that, you know, and obviously, again, today with all of the tumult going on, there's lots of major issues in different cities. So, you know, how can we as the library support our community through major issues? Okay. It's about the library user, customer, patron, whatever you call them. You know, think about your users individually. Depending on how big or small your library is, that's going to inform how you're really dealing with your patrons. A small library like mine, you know, my staff, most of my staff have been here forever. Everybody knows everybody in the community. Everybody knows everything going on in the community with people. So my staff need to get reminders on a fairly often basis that, you know, we're not here to be gossiping about people, because, you know, there's always something going on and it's generally petty. But think about your individual users that come into the library. Think about, you know, the trend with that individual user. You know, that sometimes helps to inform your reader's advisory on them, or it helps to inform you on what type of programs and classes they like. Community groups that come into your library. Who's using your library's meeting rooms? Do you have policies on that? Think about that today in particular, again, with everything going on in the world. You know, what kind of groups are allowed to come into your library? Not-for-profit groups, you know, if you allow a for-profit group in, do you charge a certain amount of money for that? You know, things like that. Interests, you know, again, looking at surveys, as a quick way. Don't use surveys exhaustively. People will get, they'll get old fast. But, you know, you can certainly use them for brief one-offs. You know, you have a 2 or 3 question survey. That's great. You know, and don't forget, you put them out on your circulation or reference desk in paper for people to answer, but also put them up on your social media and your web pages so that people can, you know, use a Survey Monkey or something like that so that people are able to answer them online and submit them to you. You'll have a greater catch to help with what you're looking for. You know, are there users that come into the library that can be turned into volunteers or join the Friends group? If you're, you know, some Friends group, it can be hard to get people onto them. Are there volunteers that can maybe become future board members? That's important to think about. And, you know, what users are coming into your library that might be potential future employees? Do you have a kid who, you know, comes to you and tells you that they want to be a librarian? Well, that's a great way to groom somebody into the profession. I had a junior last year in high school who wrote me a lovely email asking if she could be my intern for the summer because after she finishes her bachelor, she wants to do her master's in library, and I was delighted. I really wanted her to, oh, thank you. I really wanted her to focus on administration, but she wanted to be a children's librarian. So that's cool though. All right, Kelly's telling me I've got about 5 minutes left. So I am gonna zoom a little bit here so that we can get this finished up. It's about knowing your audience, and this really could be a topic that I could present on for a few hours in itself. You know your population, know the circumstances that people are coming in from, know people's triggers, you know, and you will learn these as your users are coming in and out of the library. Active listening. This is not, you know, when somebody comes into the library and they need you to listen to them. Yes, Andrea, absolutely. Internships for high school students are an absolutely amazing way to connect. Think about that. Think about, you know, a time you can get into the high school and, you know, maybe table there during parent-teacher conferences or, you know, there's certain business classes that teach kids how to go in and do interviewing and write their resume, et cetera. Maybe you could be a guest interviewer. You know, that's a great way to look for those opportunities. But again, with active listening, it's important that, you know, you're not just taking, you're not just hearing people, but you're really listening to them because they'll know if you're just kind of fluffing them off, okay? And, you know, remember empathy versus sympathy. You know, empathy is more of a, empathy is more of a skill based on what you already know. So if you can put yourself in the person's shoes. Sympathy oftentimes can come across as negative. It's sort of like oh, poor you, you know, and people don't want to hear that, you know, so try to think about your audience from an empathetic point of view, okay? It's about programming. What kind of programming do you have? What do your active programs look like? Which one of those active programs are, which ones of those active programs are the most well attended? What passive programming do you have out? Do you do adult coloring? Do you put board games out for people? You know, do you put puzzles out, etc.? How much time and how much money do you have to create your programming? And what kind of staff do you have for programming? Is it just you? Do you have a few different staff members working on programming? Think about all of those things because programming oftentimes is also going to inform your collection development, which is super important, okay? Okay, we're not gonna worry about this activity time. It's about knowing your library, what's your library best at, what are you getting better at, are you a leader in your community and how? What's the latest fad going on? So, you know, I always talk about the Pokemon little app game, like where you go catch the Pokemon at different places in the community. That was really big for a couple of weeks, but it went away pretty quick. So that was a fad, but were you in on it? You know, were you connected to the community so that you knew about it? How many visitors do you get? You know, and how can you increase those visitorship? How can you increase your visitorship? And what are your popular programs? That's super important to think about, so that you can keep those sustained, okay? All of those things that we just talked about, knowing your library, are going to inform your elevator speech when you get the mayor, or you get one of the commissioners, or you get your direct supervisor to you know, you get like 30 seconds with them, so you can always be talking about the library, okay? It's about reaching out and getting out into the community, you know, so reach out, keep it relevant, educational, active, cooperative, and helpful. And, you know, keep it open, utilized, your library being utilized, and keep your library a trusted resource, okay? So all of these resources and examples are the takeaways that I'm going to send to Kelly so that she's got them available. And for those of you in different parts of the state, she'll send them to the other library consortium so that you're able to access them from there. I want to say thank you, but I don't know if I have a couple of minutes to take questions, if anybody's got anything before I go. Let me just see. Andrea just said internships for high school students. Oh, Andrea said upward bound programs could be a starting point for those internships as well. Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate it. Sorry to rush through a little bit of the end there. And thank you for dealing with me. I'm not a tech librarian, so the Zoom stuff is still a little newer to me. I hope you guys got some good information today. Like I said, and like Kelly said, the slides will be available to you. The takeaway resources will be available to you. And I want you to know that all of the forms that I'm sending Kelly, that she'll send out to the other library cooperatives, they're all in a Word format, so you will be able to edit those and use them for your own purposes. I totally give you permission for that, because we know in libraries we like to share and not recreate the wheel, okay? And you're always welcome to email me at director@pattersonlib.org if you have any questions that you need answered, and I'm happy to work with you that way.